The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod and I'm so thrilled and excited to be here with you on this Monday morning. We are mid-October, October 14th, 2024. So much going on and we've got a big show for you today. Got a great guest. Kari Baker is going to be with us in just a couple of minutes and she's got an amazing book out that I know you guys are going to want to read. Such a great writer. We've got a news story for you this morning, and of course, we're going to do jargon of the day. But before we do any of that, I want to remind all of you that I'm Shannon Penrod. I identify as a proud pony. I am a parent of a neurodiverse individual. Those are the words that my son and I have chosen that he's good with and that I'm good with. I like it because it makes it sound like I have a ponytail. I don't have a ponytail. I'm not going to have a ponytail again in my life because I can't bear to have my hair long. You know this. So, but it makes me feel like I have a ponytail that I can flip around, and I don't know why that makes me happy. But it does. So, and it makes my son happy. He's good with the term, so I can't ask for more in life. Anyway, I'm a little silly this morning. Again, I've been having the sillies lately. I guess that's better than having the doldrums, right? Want to hear from you guys because we're live right now. We're on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and about a dozen other places. Our fabulous Chris Desmond. Oh my gosh, is he wonderful. He's showing you on the screen some of the different ways that you can be listening, watching, and participating. Obviously, when we are live, we love to hear from you guys. And I think that's the most fun thing when we're live is that we get to have a conversation with you guys. So, but we know that the lion's share of you listen to us later on in podcasts. And we love you too. I don't want you to feel that you are not important to us because you are important to us. But we also want to give you an opportunity to be involved in the live show as well. So you can always write into us in myriads of different ways, not the least of which is by sending me an email directly. You can write to me at shannon@autism-live.com. Want to remind all of you who are listening, there, look at how good Chris Desmond is. He didn't know I was going to say that, and yet he popped it up on the screen. Shannon@autism-live.com. Also want to remind all of you who listen in podcasts that that is a free download to you wherever you get your podcasts. And we hope that you appreciate that and that when the ads pop up, that you appreciate those too, because that's what makes it a free download for you. Now, if you are in a position where that just really interrupts your flow because you are working on a craft or you're on the treadmill or you're driving and you don't want to deal with the advertisements, there is a way now that you can subscribe for $5 a month, and when you do that, you get everything that we do with the Autism Network ad-free. $5 a month, which is a pretty good deal. All you have to do is go to glow.fm/autismlive, and you pay $5 a month, and there you get everything we do, and it shows up in your inbox. And it is free of ads, which is really wonderful. Remember that means you get Ask Dr. Doreen, Autism Live, and all the parent-to-parents that we do, today's hyperfixation, stories from the spectrum, everything that we do. So I hope you will check that out. Okay. When we started this show, it was very important to me as we talked about what our mission statement was, and really every year that we've been doing this show, we kind of have a health check-in around December where we talk about the coming year and we pick words that we really want to focus on for the year. But across all the years that we've been doing this show, we have said our main mission is to provide information and inspiration to that larger autism community. It starts with individuals who are themselves on the spectrum, of course, but it extends to everyone who loves those individuals. So that is what has been a key thing for us. It's our North Star. That's the direction that we walk in. Good morning, Autism Journey with Elijah. I'm so thrilled that you're here because I'd love your opinion. We had a story that I was not aware of that came to us on Friday. I don't know how I was not aware of this, but I am going to be honest with you and say I don't have any answers. I have no answers. I have lots of questions, but I'm going to bring this story to you. I don't know why I'm getting emotional for a second here, because I don't have any answers, and this is power packed, okay? We're going to talk about this for just a minute. For those of you who have not heard, Robert Robertson is scheduled to be executed in the state of Texas on Thursday. And he is battling for his life, asking for clemency, asking for a stay of execution from Governor Abbott. His case has been picked up by the Innocence Project. And if you, after hearing the story, if you feel compelled to, you can go to innocenceproject.org, and they have a bunch of things that you can do, not the least of which is calling Governor Abbott if you believe that this gentleman should not be executed on Thursday. The long and short of this story is that back in 2002, Mr. Roberson, who had a 2-year-old daughter who had a history of health issues, he brought her into an emergency room, and she was blue and non-responsive, and they tried to work on her, and she subsequently passed away. And he kind of had a very non-reaction, which they thought was very interesting. And upon further investigation, they decided at that time that she had died of shaken baby syndrome, and a day after her death, he was charged with capital murder. He has spent 20 years in jail. A great deal of research has been done on this, and there have been many people who have gone back and looked at the case and said, we are not sure that she actually died of shaken baby syndrome, and that they feel now that part of the reason why they were so convinced that he had murdered her was because of his non-reaction, that he didn't make eye contact and that he was lacking emotion about her death. Mr. Roberson has been diagnosed with autism while he has been sitting in jail, and his attorney has said, and I'm going to quote here what the attorney has said in his clemency petition. Robert's disability directly contributed to his wrongful conviction when investigators assumed his flat demeanor during pronounced stress, a manifestation of his autism, was a sign of culpability. And the Innocence Project has said that people diagnosed with ASD are 7 times more likely to have encounters with criminal legal system than those without the disorder. They face significant risks of wrongful conviction for crimes they didn't commit or that never happened due to inadequate legal representation, communication challenges, and law enforcement bias. Okay, I don't know. I don't know what happened with his daughter, and I don't know if this gentleman really has gotten an accurate diagnosis of autism. I'm just going to say that. I don't know. But he is scheduled to be put to death on Thursday, and if that happens, he will be the first person ever to be put to death for shaken baby syndrome. There is a bipartisan majority of the Texas legislators in the House that are still pushing for his execution to be halted. In September, 86 members of the Texas House signed a letter pressing the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles to recommend clemency. They had previously halted his execution back in 2016. So here we are. I don't know. I don't have answers. But I'm giving you guys the information, and if you feel compelled to write something about it, you can go to innocenceproject, I believe, .org and say your piece. I don't know. But the whole thing makes me sad, sad, sad. Autism Journey with Elijah says, people have different reactions to different situations. His demeanor doesn't mean anything. The shock puts people in a situation that they have no idea. This hurts my heart. I will go and write something and look into it. How really sad. It is really sad. No matter how you look at it, there is a child who has passed away. There has been significant evidence revealed since then showing that she did have other health issues. And I think I had read that she had been to the doctor a couple of days before with a high fever. I will say that it seems as though there are enough people who have looked at the case long and hard who have said we need to reopen the case and look at it. that seems to be the general consensus. When you have a bipartisan majority of the Texas legislators saying we think this needs to be looked at, then it seems like, why would you put someone to death when there are more questions? I started this with I have more questions than answers, but I wanted you guys to know so that if you feel compelled, you will go and do something. We have to do a hard shift. I know when I watch the news and people say something really hard and then they switch to something lighter, it's like, what? So I'm going to apologize for that. We are going to go back to our jargon of the day because it is important that we move forward. So why do we do jargon of the day? Jargon of the day is because there are all these terms that if we don't understand them, they can't really help us, right? So we do jargon of the day to give you a term that, and what we do now, when we started, we would give you the actual definition and make fun of it because it was so inaccessible. But things have gotten better. Yay! And I'm going to lay that sort of at the feet of AI because AI has been really instrumental in the last year putting things into terms that the general public can understand. So now we're going to give you the AI definition and then we're going to drill down a little bit. So our jargon today is visual supports. This is something we talk about a lot, and it occurred to me the other day, somebody said to me, what does that actually mean? And I went, oh, why are we not defining this for people? Because this is one of the things that you will see pop up a lot in IEPs, especially, that your child might have the right to visual supports in the classroom. Well, what does that mean? So let's take a look at what our Google AI definition says. It says visual supports are visual items, well, thank you, AI, such as pictures, symbols, objects, gestures, signs, or written words that help with communication and understanding. I always love it when jargon is defined with the same words that are in the thing. Visual supports are visual. Thank you. Appreciate you so much. Okay, so, all right, but that doesn't really tell me enough that I want to hear. So let's go on to our next definition, see if we can drill down on this. Visual supports, written words, pictures, and or icons that convey information in visual medium. Not that much better. Individuals with ASD are typically visual learners, and conveying information visually assists with comprehension. And that's from easterseals.com. Thank you, Easter Seals, for making it just so crystal clear. So imagine that you are a kiddo sitting in a classroom and there's a lot of stuff going on, right? But if the teacher says something in the midst of all this cacophony of noises, the clock ticking, there's the buzz of the lights, there's the kids sitting next to you and talking, there's all these, visual things that are everywhere. But if the teacher says, okay, right now I want you to, stand up, put your books away, and get in line. Oh my gosh, that's 3 things. You want me to put my book away, stand up, and get in line. But notice that I said, stand up, put your book away, get in line, because sometimes our kids can't go, well, let me put my book away before I stand up, even though she said it in that order, right? And it's a lot to remember, first of all, and a lot of times our kids will glom onto the first part of it and get lost and forget what the next part of it is. So if the teacher says it, right, but holds up a sign that it's an icon that shows the kids lining up, and maybe she holds up one about putting the books away, right? Then it helps because it's a reminder of doing something. There are a lot of us in this world that a reminder will help us to do something. Think about everything that you want to learn and how much of it you're learning online and watching a video doing it. Ooh, right? That's a visual support. A sign. You're on the freeway and it's showing you which direction to go. That's a visual support. I have a little screen on my car now that says, veer to this way. That's a visual support. We all need visual supports. But especially for our kiddos on the spectrum, they can be really, really helpful. I remember my dad had a stroke when he was young, very, very young. He had a stroke and he was trying to learn how to speak again. It's very interesting that, I dealt with that early in life, and I remember all the things that we did to help him back to speech, which ended up being a lot of the same things that we used to help my son back to speech. But I remember my mom had bought a bunch of Post-it notes, and she would write names of things with an arrow to what they were. Because my dad called everything orange juice. Everything was orange juice. I want some orange juice. You give him orange juice. And he's like, why are you giving me that? I want some orange juice, right? He couldn't think what the word was. So we started giving him visual supports. There were Post-it notes all over the house. And my mother got so into it that she would do that for all of us. That I'd come home from college, and I left my alarm clock for some reason at college. And I said, gosh, I need an alarm clock. And I got up the next morning, and on the kitchen counter, there was a clock with a Post-it note with an arrow that said clock, because she just got used to it. But visual supports can be very helpful. We all use them every day. And if you start thinking that way and think, okay, what visual supports would help? If you're a teacher, you're thinking about what would help my student. If you're a parent, you're thinking what would help my child, right? Really important. Visual supports, they are a very good thing. Okay, so that's our jargon of the day. I want to tell you a little bit about our guest. What a really wonderful woman Kari Baker is. She has a book out right now that we're going to be talking about called Finding Kind. And I'm reading it. I'm about halfway through it. And I said to her, this is the highest compliment I can give. A lot of times I get a book and I don't really have enough time to really cover to cover read the whole thing and really digest it. So sometimes I've got to skim, And I found myself this weekend, I got the book and I started to read it, and I just couldn't make myself skim it because it's that good. She's telling her story and it's compelling. So I'm about halfway through it. I know how it ends up, but it's very, very compelling. So what I want you to know is that Kari A. Baker is a former financial services executive and a business owner turned author, speaker, and podcaster. She is the founder of Kind Families, a community of people who love kids with invisible neurological differences. And she is also the host of the Kind Families podcast. Kari became a kind mom in 2014 when her son Brady was diagnosed with autism at the age of 3. She started Kind Families to encourage, support, and inspire others to find purpose and promise in kindness. And as I said, her book is, I guess it's actually being released like in a couple of days. I thought it was already out, but we'll ask her to tell us more about that. So let's welcome for the first time to the show, Kari Baker. Yay!
Thank you. Oh my gosh. Thank you. You almost made me cry with the introduction. So.
Oh, well, my goodness.
That was so nice.
So thrilled to have you here. I don't know where to start, but let's start with, so the book isn't out until the 22nd?
Correct.
Okay. I got
so a week from tomorrow.
All right. Well, are you so excited?
I am so excited. It is like the longest pregnancy ever.
And there's the book.
When you have this idea, and I actually started writing in 2018, so it has been a 6-year pregnancy, but it's come into fruition. And now that we have some of the advanced copies out and people are getting to get a taste of it, it's overwhelming. It's exciting.
And it is sort of like a pregnancy, right? Because now it's here. You can't change anything about it.
Nope.
It is what it is. But it's really good, Kari. And, I always say whenever I'm talking to a parent about their origin story, because how did we all come to be a part of this community? And even though our origin stories are very different, right? I found myself so relating to so many of the things that you were saying. And you write from a very honest, raw, emotional place. So I thank you for that, because I think there is something in that that's soothing and cathartic when we hear other people's origin stories. Right. But you do so much more than that. We get to see the transformation that happens, not just in your son, but in you as well. And we're going to talk more about that in a second. But let's start by you telling us, it's called Finding Kind, and Kind is all capitalized. What does Kind stand for? I gave it away a little bit, but tell us again.
Yeah. So Kind is Kids with Invisible Neurological Differences, And it was something that came to me when my son was about 6 or 7 years old. And we were really struggling to explain some of the things that he was going through, especially because, he looks just like every other kid in the classroom. There's no distinguishing mark of autism that he was displaying that would allow others to show him a little bit more grace, or kids to give him a little bit of, extra consideration. And the invisibility of it was what I was struggling with. And so in 2018, I said I started writing. And that was where I was writing from a lot of the hard stories. So I was jotting them down. And the KIND acronym came to me at that point, that he is a kid with invisible neurological differences. And the neurological differences that he has, they make him react to the world around him and experience the world around him in a different way. And so the KIND acronym came to me back then, but at the time I was just writing all the hard stuff. And I wrote a ton, and I wrote all the stories about schools and about other kids and about community and those kinds of things, and isolation, and really coming to terms with it. But I think the story of our family needed to steep a little bit longer.
Yeah.
So that I could really start to pull out where the hope was and where the encouragement is, and to really see my son for who he is, which is not just a kid with autism and ADHD and these other diagnoses. He is this super creative, smart, funny, wonderful, loyal, kind kid in every sense of the word. So that's kind of why the project took so long to come to fruition, because I was trying to write a story that I didn't have a happy ending to yet. And it's not that autism has gone away. It's not that we don't still struggle. He's 13. He's in middle school. And let me tell you, middle school is no joke.
Yeah.
So, we still struggle with things. But when I was able to change my perspective on my son and who he is and what he can do, it changed our whole family's life, and presented us with some hope and encouragement that he is going to be exactly who he's supposed to be, as long as we can recognize it and nurture it within him. So,
yeah, it really made me think so much as I was reading the book about, I've said this many times, that I think there's this point where parents get to, and not everybody gets there, but I have seen the transformation the day when a parent stops arguing, why did this happen, and moves into the acceptance of this is. And it's a subtle shift, but it's a ginormous shift. And I hear that in you.
Absolutely. And it took me a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, it took me years. So I'm kind of a doer. I'm a business person at heart. So I let myself be devastated when we got the diagnosis. And it was actually before we even got the diagnosis. So I had been recognizing a lot of things in my son and didn't know what was going on. And I happened to come home one day after dropping him at preschool, read an article, took an online quiz, and I answered every question yes on the quiz. And up popped the result, which was, you need to have your child diagnosed for possible autism spectrum disorder. And I didn't know anything about it. I was terrified. I didn't know anybody with autism. I didn't know anything about autism. And so I let myself be devastated for about 15 minutes,
Yeah.
But then I got on the internet. I started researching, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? And I stayed in that mode for years. Really, until my son was probably 3 or 4 years into the diagnosis. I was in a state of secrecy. I felt isolated. We didn't want to tell anyone, because we thought everybody in the world was as ignorant about autism as we were when he was first diagnosed. So it was a long path to getting to that transformation that you're talking about, from why did this happen and what can I do about it, to okay, I still need to be doing things about it. I still need to help my son. There still needs to be intervention. I still need to be, doing the research and on top of everything. But at the same time, I can celebrate exactly who he is.
Yeah.
I can celebrate that he writes stories and that he's got this beautiful creative mind and that he has never said a cross word to any other person on the planet, except me in the early years. And you can read about that a little bit in the book.
Yeah.
And that's typical with kids with autism. They, hold everything together for the rest of the world and then just kind of let loose with the person they're closest with, which is usually mom. And, but he's got all of these amazing qualities. And when we started celebrating those more than lamenting some of the things that he was struggling with, it really started to change the game for us.
I want to go back to the beginning because you had something happen before you took that quiz, that where you had this moment that you write about so eloquently about a reaction that you had to something that if this had happened 2 months later, you might have had a very different reaction. That led to, I think, because you write a whole chapter about shame that you were just talking about, and part of the reason why you kept it secret. Do you want to tell a little bit about what happened, or you want to tease it to them so that they have to read the book to find out?
I'd love for them to read the whole story, but
yeah.
Ironically, this happened about 2 or 3 weeks before I took that quiz, that online quiz, and my family and I had an outing to a trampoline park. There was a boy there who was quite a few years older. He was probably about the same age as my son is now today, in the trampoline area with my son and my best friend's daughters. And he grabbed my friend's daughter and smashed her up against the plexiglass. Now, he didn't hurt her. She was okay, but I think we were all in shock. And I picked up my friend's daughter, and the dad came rushing up. It all happened very quickly, obviously, but as soon as it happened, I saw a man come rushing up, and he was apologizing profusely, and he said, I'm so sorry, my son has Asperger's. And my reaction was, well, then he shouldn't be hanging out with other kids. Get him out of the trampoline park. And it was just stunning to me that, for Asperger's at the time, they were still diagnosing Asperger's, pretty close up until that time.
Yeah.
So I didn't understand that was under the umbrella of autism. But I showed that man no grace whatsoever. I didn't have any. I was completely void of grace in that moment. And to take that quiz 3 weeks later, and actually, ironically, the website link for the quiz was thinkaspergers.com. So to take that quiz 3 weeks later and have that so fresh in my mind, and that was part of the fear that set in. That was part of the reason for that. We need to lock this down. We need to, not tell people. We need to, explain away the fact that he had an aide in preschool and kindergarten. We need to just call them developmental delays because, that image and that reaction that I had was still just so fresh when we were going through it. And I didn't want to have other people react to our son the same way I did to that poor man's. And, I think about him all the time still and what he's going through, what he's been through, and the impulsiveness that can come with autism and also with ADHD that my son has also been diagnosed with. And, that parent has probably done so much to try to include their kid in other just kid activities.
Yeah. And
I stomped on his freedom to do that day, and it breaks my heart. It still breaks my heart. But all I can do now, I'll never see that man again, and all I can do now is try with Kind Families and with the book to help people be aware of what autism is, what what goes on is really real. It's a real difference in the way that our kids perceive the world and react to it, and that their reactions are real reactions to real physical things that happen in their body. And so that's my penance, I guess, that I would pay in response to that reaction that I had, is to try to help other people understand it better. And I have been on the receiving end of that,
Yeah,
as well. So
we all have.
it was a very difficult wake-up call.
We all have, but I think this is a double-edged sword too, because in the book, one of the things that you said that you were thinking that you didn't say to the dad was, if you know he's going to behave this way, then why aren't you here instead of having to run across the playground? And I don't want to fault the dad here, but I do think, and it's funny because we just did the story, the news story, that while we do understand that there is an impulsivity and that there is some emotional control that is not there often and that can happen suddenly, it doesn't mean that we can't be responsible and that our kids can't be responsible. So, it was so good that your friend's daughter didn't get hurt, but she might have been.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
On the one hand, I want to be as compassionate as possible always, because I've been on the receiving end of being said, why can't you control your kid? Like, I know what that feels like as a parent, but we also have to, help build a world around our kids to keep them safe so that they don't have the ability to hurt somebody else, because consequences
Absolutely.
exist in our society. So I loved the story and how you reacted to it. But I also think it's important, because I do know some parents who say, well, my child has autism, so therefore that's why they're hitting your child. And I don't accept that. I don't accept that.
No. And I've been fortunate, I will say, that, like I said, my son has never had those kinds of aggressive characteristics that have come out. So I have not personally had to deal with him, reacting in a way that hurts somebody. But I on both sides of the spectrum, we got to keep the kids safe. But but I now have a better. We were at a coffee place for breakfast just a few weeks ago, and there was a boy standing in line, and he was making cooing sounds, kind of like a bird. And his mom kept trying to control him, and there were people standing in the line that were getting irritated with him. And I just kind of made eye contact with her and kind of winked at her and gave her that look, like, I know that this is his stim. This is what he's, And so having somebody in the line with you that can understand that, especially if those behaviors are not harming anybody else, but are comforting to the kid, that there's a level of grace and understanding, even if it's just one person standing in a line.
Absolutely. Because when did cooing ever hurt anybody?
Right.
My goodness. Okay, I want to talk about the fact that you very unapologetically in the beginning of the book say that, I think, in fact, you say that Jesus is a big, I don't think you just say God or spirituality. I think you say Jesus is a big part of this book. And I'm not telling this story without that. You are absolutely unapologetic, which I appreciate, because it kind of gave me a warning. Because there's a part of the book. Well, no, because there's a part of the book where you don't say that, and then it comes into play pretty heavily, because you went through, I don't know, what do you call it? A spiritual experience, a rejuvenation? What do you call it?
Well, I think I just hit the bottom of myself. I was running so hard and so fast, and I had this fake persona I was putting on to everybody else that everything was okay, that, my life plan hadn't been chucked out the window, and that I was handling everything just fine, and eventually in doing that, I hit the bottom of the well, and I wasn't sure, what was going to pick me back up again. And I will say that I felt a calling to, like, let's go into church and just see if I can get a message. And I started hearing a message that was something based in identity separate from what kind of neurological wiring we have, or who we are, where we were born, or who we were born to, but that there is an identity in each one of us that has been, laid out from the very, very beginning, very purposefully, and that each one of us has gifts and talents that can be used to help others. And I had started to dig deeper and get more involved in faith-based activities. I started a Bible study, which you guys, if the people who knew me, 10 years ago, if you would Kari Baker ever set foot in a Bible study, they probably would like fall over laughing. But it was a calling and it was a pull, but it was also a reaction to me not finding anything else that was helping me understand everything that was going on with my son and in my life and this failed plan that I'd had. So it's a big part of it. But through the reason I put that up front in the book, there are going to be people who are turned off by that, but I also try to explain the lessons that I learned through my faith in a way that anybody can understand, regardless of where they are in a faith journey or if they even have one. And so I hope that comes across as well. I sent it to an autism mom Instagram person, and she wrote back and she's like, there was a lot of faith in it, but it didn't offend me. And I took that as a great compliment.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I don't want to offend anybody, but it was a huge part of me really identifying who I am, who my son is, that I was born to be I was put on this earth to be his mom, and that he has been put on this earth to help other people as well. And throughout his life, whether it be his teachers or his providers, I can't tell you the number of people who have come up to me and just tell me that their life is better because they know Brady.
Yeah.
And so I think that, understanding that there is purpose behind things. There are hard things that all of us are going to go through. And, our journey is not over yet. Our journey is just, 13 years in. And we are going to continue to meet challenges and struggles and pain. But we are being formed in a way that we can react to that with purpose and love and grace. And, the thing that has been really telling to me is that my son has a faith. And with me, kind of starting this journey, not really having any kind of faith except for childhood upbringing, going to church because my parents, that's what you did on Sunday a few times. Seeing this kid who's got a very black and white brain and has a hard time grasping things that are in the gray areas, really finding that himself has been really rewarding for me and confirming of who he is and that he was made exactly the way he's supposed to be made.
I love that. You say finding purpose in the face of a failed plan. What was the failed plan?
Oh, I had my parenting path all planned out. It was going to be awesome. I was going to be the best. Oh my gosh. I mean, I was a business person. I was organized. I had everything laid out. We bought a house that is literally 3 blocks away from the elementary school, the middle school, and the high school, like the public schools in our neighborhood. I'm like, I'm never going to have to do a commute. I had everything perfectly planned. I was a certified financial planner, so that was my thing, and I thought I was pretty good at it. And I thought I would be, on the same path with all these other moms that were, doing things at the same time. One of the things that struck me before we had any idea that Brady had autism is I would take him to play dates. And if the kids were all in one room, Brady would be as far away from them as he could. And so I would either have to be, in the other room trying to pull him back to the kids, or he would be trying to run out the front door and I would be chasing him down to keep him from going in the street. And I used to joke that I needed to get a babysitter for play dates because I never got to talk to the other moms. I never got that like mom bonding experience that the play dates were supposed to give me as a parent. So, this vision that I had in my head of what parenting was going to look like, it was that I was going to take my kid to basketball and baseball practice, not speech and OT. It was not that I was going to have to follow, my kid all over in a, 2 feet away from him anytime we were in a public place. That wasn't the plan. It wasn't, going places and having him melt down in front of a crowd of people, and me not know why. And so this plan that I had, I was still grasping on years after he was diagnosed. And that's why I kept everything so quiet. That's why I created this kind of circle of secrecy around me, because if anybody knew, then my whole shtick is blown.
Yeah.
So it really kind of got to the point where I knew after several years, this is who my child is. And I need to start embracing that, because I don't want him to ever be ashamed of who he is.
Yeah.
I don't want him to ever feel like he is less than somebody else because of the way his brain is wired. And I'll never forget telling him that the day that we decided to tell him about autism and ADHD, he was going into 2nd grade, and for the first time he was going to go into a specialty school that was made specifically for kids with learning challenges, ADHD, dyslexia, autism, those kinds of things. And we knew that there were going to be older kids there that would have a awareness of their diagnosis, and we didn't want Brady to be taken off guard. So I planned this big old conversation, and we sat down and we talked about autism and ADHD, and he kind of took it all in and took it with stride for the most part. But the most telling thing was the next day he went in to get a haircut, and haircuts were challenging, as I'm sure a lot of autism moms can relate. But we went into this barber shop that we had gotten a comfort level with, and he sat down in the chair, and it was a new person, and I was a little bit nervous about it. And the barber comes up and starts to cut his hair, and he's doing okay, and then gets to the point where she wants to put some hair gel on. And he just held his hand up and he said, I don't want any hair gel because I have an autism brain. Mm. And I just froze, because again, we weren't super out in the open with it. And the whole barbershop just froze, and then everybody started to laugh. And, it was just kind of this release, like, and he even said to his teachers that knowing that there is a reason for why certain things are harder for him than other kids, why he had an aide in his classroom with them preschool and kindergarten, why he has to go to speech and OT, understanding that just released all this anxiety that he was feeling about why he was different than the other kids that he was around. So, and that was confirmation even further for me that, he is exactly as he is supposed to be made. And this kid has written 150 creative writing stories. I mean, he's going to go and do something awesome with the way his brain is wired. He might just need some supports and some, guardrails around him in order to do that.
Obviously he wrote the foreword of the book, but what does he think about this book, Mom?
He loves it. And he's read it cover to cover. He's a voracious reader. I should put that into the world as well. So he reads like crazy. So I started kind of feeding him some of the chapters, chapter by chapter, especially the ones later in the book, which covers some of the awesome things that he's done in his life and ways that he's surprised us and challenges that he's overcome. And of course he loved that. And, when I started sharing some of the harder chapters with him, then we had to have the conversation, is it okay for us to put this out in the world? Yeah. And he really wants other kids who have neurological differences like him to hear these stories. And he told me, Mom, it was really good to understand what you were feeling during some of those hard, challenging stories that you told. Yeah. One of the chapters I write about the differences in my parents and my sister based on their relationship with him. And that was really powerful for him. He didn't understand how much he changed other people's lives just by being who he is. Yeah. And so I'm so proud of him that he's on the journey with me. And I told him this weekend we're having a book signing on launch day, and I told him he needs to practice his autograph. And he's like, I'm not gonna sign any books, Mom. That's your book. It's your book. But I told him, I'm like, I think you might be the one that gets to be famous on this, because
right.
He's and the foreword, honestly, he wrote it in one take.
Wow.
We had kind of a funny conversation at dinner about, well, maybe I should get you to write the foreword. And he went back in his room and came out. And I was, to be honest with you, a little bit nervous. I'm like, well, I'm not sure what he's going to come out with. So I don't want to make any promises. He laid it down in front of me, and I just said, buddy, that is perfect.
Yeah.
It's
really
him to a T. And it just gives everybody a little insight into who he is. And I actually did a Kind Families podcast episode that is coming out tomorrow morning, is my conversation with Brady. And we talk about the book and him writing the foreword and what it's like to be the second main character in a book like this, where our life is kind of laid out on the table for everybody to read.
And it really is. But let's talk about the fact that, you were a financial services executive and you left that. Let's talk a little bit about what made you, and what did you leave it for? Because you just mentioned the podcast.
So for 30 years, I was in the financial services business.
First of all, you don't look like you've been able to do anything for 30 years, let alone
I think Zoom does some facial corrections.
Well, it's
on
working
me here.
for you.
I'm 53.
Well,
I'm
you
53
don't look
years old. Proud of it. But I'd always wanted to be in finance. So I was exactly where I wanted to be for most of my career. And the last 14 years, I had been specifically working with 401k plans, companies and their 401k plans. So helping people plan for retirement. Yeah. There goes the planner thing again. And just probably, 2 or 3 years ago, I just really started feeling pulled away from it. As Brady was growing and I was starting to get myself more involved in the Kind community out there, and I was writing a little bit. And I had a partner in the business, and I went to her at the beginning of 2022, and I said, maybe we should think about an exit strategy for this business, because I'm starting to feel pulled away from it. I'm not enjoying the meetings as much anymore. It's kind of getting repetitive for me. And so as it turned out later that year, we had an opportunity to sell the business. And we did. And she decided to keep going with the business. She was very involved in the industry. And I had the opportunity to step back, and just felt like it was the right thing to do, to say, could I make this Kind Families thing my thing? And so I took this 180-degree turn, and I spent most of 2023 writing and getting the book ready to go. And now, it was actually funny. I got asked to do a consulting job for the 401k industry several months ago. And at first I was like, well, I should probably do it. I'll bring some income into the family and that sort of thing. And as I started to work through it and signing up for it, it made me sick to my stomach. And I told my husband that, and he's like, don't do it. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. So I just feel like this is the path that I'm supposed to be on. There is so much exciting things. There are so many exciting things that are happening in the neurodiverse community right now. There is just like this little budding of awareness of companies saying, we can interview differently. We can supervise people differently who are neurodiverse. There is this growing compassion for people who are neurodiverse in schools, and there's an emphasis on early diagnosis. There's all these kind of budding things that are really hopeful for the autism community. And that's where I want to be. I want to be, at the head of that, saying, let's talk to companies about changing their hiring practices. Let's talk to schools about making kids more compassionate. Let's talk to churches about how you can be more inclusive for families who have kids with special needs in your Sunday school classes. Let's just let other parents know that they're not alone. I was so isolated in the beginning of this process, and I looked for a book or for stories that were personal along this subject. I found a lot of medical journals. I found a lot of therapy, how-to-dos, books. But at the time, 10 years ago, I didn't have a lot of resources that told me stories that would make me feel like I was part of a community. And so that's where we're starting with Kind Families. And I think we've got a lot of big dreams on where we're going to go. But, the change in my career is just part of the path. It's part of the story of there being purpose in painful things that you go through. So, and I feel like this is my purpose now. And, if Brady hadn't been born the way he is, exactly the way he is, he not only has a purpose, but I do too.
Yeah.
And it fills me with so much joy and excitement and encouragement that I can't imagine doing anything else.
Yeah. It's interesting because there was so much that you were writing about in the book that I related to, and yet our stories are so different. But I feel the same way. This was not where I intended to be and what I intended to be doing at all. But I couldn't be more grateful that this is where my life has turned. And when I think about the fact that this would not have happened had my son not been diagnosed, it's just, I wish there was a time machine that I could go back and talk to the mom that I was on the day that he was diagnosed, who was filled with fear, who was like, why, how could this possibly have happened to us? Why were we chosen for this? I don't think I'm up for this, right? I wish I could, I can't go back and, I do talk to her all the time, but I can't physically go back in time, but it's become part of my mission to try to talk to those moms and say, I know, I felt that way. Look at me, I'm okay.
And it's okay to feel that way.
It is okay.
It's normal. It's okay as long as you don't, my encouragement is it's okay to feel that way as long as you don't stay there.
Exactly.
Don't build a house in the middle of all the despair. Stay there for a while and figure out, where you're going and step away from it. And it took me a long time to do that. But it was all part of a very intentional process that I had to go through.
Yeah.
To get as convicted as I am today about the purpose that is in each one of us.
Absolutely.
So and you've got the gifts and talents that you have to run this show. And so all of those things play into it. So
likewise.
I just love that.
So how can people, first of all, the book will be out on the 22nd. Where can they buy it? Where do you want them to buy it from?
So if you just go to kindfamilies.com, that's the easiest way to do it. And there's a link to purchase the book on that website.
Okay.
And it'll actually go out. So we've been taking pre-orders, and they're going to start mailing pre-orders tomorrow. So if they order something today, the orders will start going out ASAP. So, and then the Kind Families podcast is on Apple and Spotify. Okay. And those are really the best places to start. I am on Instagram. Being a financial services person for 30 years, I was not on social media for 30 years and had to kind of learn that and pick that one back up. So I actually do have a lot more impact on LinkedIn because they all know me as a 401k consultant. But on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook, I'm at Kari A. Baker.
Okay. So check you out there and get the book. But go to kindfamilies.com because, as you said, you have a vision for this being a community to support families that we want to be kind to. And again, that stands for, tell people what KIND stands for.
Kids with Invisible Neurological Differences.
And are those the words? What are the words that you and Brady use to describe his relationship and your relationship to autism?
So Brady has always preferred to say that he has autism or he is a kid with autism. And I don't know if maybe that was partly conditioning because it was so hard for me initially to come to terms with saying he is autistic. But that's something that he's most comfortable with because he also does have ADHD. And as far as I know, there's no identity associated with ADHD. And then we've talked about lately like AUDHD has come into play, and he does not like that at all for some reason. So we usually just say he has autism or he was diagnosed with autism, and that's where his comfort level is. So that's where we're at with him.
I love it because we talked about this before the show. Everybody has their own words, and it's okay what words you use to describe yourself. Right. We all need to make room for that. Really incredibly shocking to me that we have to say that, but we need to remind everybody of that on a regular basis because we get tied to words. But so let's let people identify how they want to identify. Really remarkable. I just want to thank you so much. We often talk here about in the beginning that there's like 3 different kinds of families that, there are the families where kids are not developing and meeting their milestones so that they're not speaking, and speech was not a part of their development before they're diagnosed. Then there are kiddos like my son that had language and lost language, and we have to fight to get language back. And then there are families that have kiddos who have language, that's not the battle that they're fighting. Sometimes they're fighting the battle for it to be reciprocal, but there's emotional regulation. And it's very interesting to me that every camp seems to think that, there are pluses and minuses and all the different things. And I think your book is the first book that I've read that is about kiddos in that 3rd category that have the language, but that I truly got to see what the struggles were for him and for you. Because I think that a lot of time when a child has language, the rest of the community says, well, then you didn't have it as hard. And I think you've done a real service to the parents and the kiddos in that category about how that the struggle is real, that it cannot be discounted, that it should not be discounted, that it's still a tough road. And so I want to thank you for that because I think that's an important contribution to the autism community.
Well, thank you for that. And that is something that we found that was different, and kind of one of the reasons that KIND and the Invisible Neurological Difference came about too, because I think there is a difference in acceptance and grace and understanding that because my son can speak does not mean he is processing what you're saying or is able to process a response and can relate to other people in a group or in a conversation. And those are all skills that have to be taught and are not instinctual.
Absolutely.
So.
Well, I thank you so much for your time and for your efforts, and can't wait to see all the amazing things that you're going to do.
Thank you so much. I just have loved being here, Shannon. Thank you.
Likewise. All right. You have a great day.
You too.
Bye-bye. I didn't get a chance at the start of the show. I was so busy talking about the news story that I didn't talk about the All Ghouls Gala. Don't forget, you guys, we're less than 2 weeks away from the All Ghouls Gala. Really amazing fundraiser, the biggest fundraiser of the year for Autism Care Today. By the way, if you're wanting to apply for a grant, tomorrow is the last day for this year to apply for a grant from Autism Care Today. If you want more information about that, go to ACT-today, .com.org. It's .org. Okay. There we go. But we have a new promo for the All Ghouls Gala that talks a little bit more about ACT Today. I want to show that right now, and then we'll come back to close out the show. Take a look.
Since 2005, Autism Care Today has distributed more than $2 million in grants to families with autism. Grants for things like copays on ABA therapy, protective fencing, speech and language assistive devices like iPads, and so much more. This year, ACT Today's 3rd annual All Ghouls Gala will take place on October 26th in Woodland Hills. There will be food, drinks, celebrities, and a silent auction. Click the QR code now and get your tickets and help this amazing organization support the families who need it most.
So I hope you will join us at that. There are still some tickets available, although they're selling quickly. It's on the 26th of October. It's an amazing, I hope you got to see that the 2 sides of this. We're raising money to help individuals on the autism spectrum. We're doing it by having this amazing Halloween party, celebrities, as you saw, gourmet food. at an incredible venue. So I encourage you. The tickets are $125 a piece. I know for some of us that's like, that's a lot of money, right? But remember that is going to be able to help families. And it's so much less than most of the other fundraisers. We tried to keep the price point at a really affordable place. And we hope you bring your credit card, because there will be lots of other ways that you will be treated to that will be exciting for you. Maybe purchase some things that are amazing, but the money goes towards helping those grants. So check that out. We'll be talking about that tomorrow with Dr. Doreen Grant-Pichet, because this is a charity that she started, and I think it's her favorite night of the year. So we'll be back tomorrow with Dr. Doreen to talk about that and to talk about ODD. Tomorrow's the topic is ODD. You know, is that a diagnosis that is a viable diagnosis? And if it is an ODD, but you're seeing signs of it, how do you treat that? So that will be very interesting to talk about with Dr. Grant-Pichet. She will be in the studio today, fingers crossed, all things being equal. She's been through 2 hurricanes since she was last with us, so I'm sure we'll talk about that and how she's faring through that. But all of that tomorrow on Ask Dr. Doreen. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now. If you found anything helpful in this video, please give us a like. In fact, make sure that you smash that subscribe button on YouTube and give us a like on Facebook. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Instagram for important updates. And please download our free podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much. See you next time.